Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 6th meeting of the Corporate Services Committee. It being 12 p.m., I'm going to call the meeting to order. I want to begin by recognizing that the City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape-Pewak, and Attawandaron peoples. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. And as representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. I will also add that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact csc@london.ca or phone 519-661-2489, extension 2425. And I will begin by looking for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. I see none. We will move along to the consent agenda. We have 4 items. I have been asked to have 2.4 dealt with separately by Councillor Trussow, so we will deal with that after we deal with the remainder of the agenda. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder on the consent items 2.1 through 2.3 inclusive. Moved by Councillor McAllister and seconded by Councillor Stevenson. Any discussion on 2.1 through 2.3? Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, and through the chair, I had a question on page 18. It's regarding 2.3. It says paid pandemic average lost hours for 2020 to 2022. And I noticed that the number of incidents and the number of hours were significantly higher in 2022. And I just wondered if there was any explanation for that or just...
And we'll go to the city manager for that.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. 2022 includes the front end of the year where we were dealing with the Omicron surge, and that was probably the most impactful for us as an organization in terms of the number of employees that were impacted by COVID-19, unwell. We had many people that were affected during that time, so that's the increase that you see there. It was more so at that time than any other point in time of the pandemic.
Thank you, Ms. Livingston. Anything further, Councillor Stevenson?
Just thank you for that, because it was surprising to see 2022 almost 2 times that of 2020. But thank you.
And Councillor Trussow. Your mic, please, Councillor.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would like to ask a very quick question about the debenture issue. Is it correct to say that once we issue one of these, we live with it during its entire lifetime and we can't elect to pay it down in the middle?
Let's take that question to Ms. Barbon.
Which is to say it's not callable?
Ms. Barbon.
Thank you, through the chair. That is absolutely correct. They are not callable, and once they are issued, we need to go through to the end of the debt issuance to fulfill the requirements.
Councillor Trussow.
And that we can avoid new debt by paying cash, but that might not be our best situation, and these debentures are very routine and there's nothing unusual about this.
Ms. Barbon.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, this is routine. These are built into our budgets when they are approved and ratified each and every year. And the money exists for these amounts based on very specific capital projects. So certainly we can avoid debt issuance costs if we choose to fund those capital projects through the tax levy. So typically we have a blend when we look at the projects that are eligible for that in accordance with our debt issuance and debt management strategy.
Thank you very much.
Mayor Morgan.
Yes, on the same item, I'll just provide a comment, then I have a question. I think Councillor Trossow's question is very astute, And over the course of my time on council, I think I've seen us do that balance between what should we pay under capital levy, which we've increased over time to ensure that we're doing pay-as-you-go financing for appropriate short-term capital projects, but also ensuring that we spread the cost of long-term capital projects over the generations that will benefit from it. So in some cases, that means we will have things that we'll pay for as you go, some short-term and some long-term debt. And I think our staff have managed that quite well over the term of my time on council. But the question I have is, in the rising interest rate environment, we've been fairly successful in not only achieving competitive interest rates, given the others that are being achieved in the market, but also that our issuances have been well subscribed and oversubscribed so that they're very easy to fill. As we approach this new issuance with the changes in market conditions and interest rates, do we anticipate that that we will be similar in the past, that although the rate might not be as low as we've gotten in the past given the market conditions, that we expect municipal bonds and municipal debentures to be fully subscribed for those of us with a AAA credit rating?
Thank you, Mayor Morgan. Ms. Barbone.
Yes, thank you for that question. It certainly, we have no indications that would prove that otherwise at this point. And we've, I think, been very fortunate to have them well subscribed in the past, and we anticipate that that will continue. Certainly, another year of our AAA credit rating certainly supports that, which has been very positive in that regard as well. So we're proceeding to go forward with their usual timing. We think it is still in our best interest, although interest rates are slightly higher than what we had last year. But certainly, if we wait, that's something that we can't time the market, and could be worse if we continue to look at that as a precursor for when we might issue debt. So certainly we have no anticipation that they'll be different this year from any other in the past.
Thank you very much.
I have no one else on the speakers list, so I'll just call one more time for questions or comments. Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to open the vote on the consent agenda 2.1 through 2.3.
Closing the vote, and the motion passes 6-0.
All right, colleagues, moving on. As is our proper procedure, 2.4 was pulled, so we will deal with that under deferred matters, additional business. Under item 3, scheduled items, we have no items. Under item 4, items for direction, we have 5 proclamation applications. As usual, we can deal with these all together, or we can deal with these individually, or a combination thereof. I'm in your hands. I will note, just for colleagues' sake, that in reviewing these, all 5 applications do have a London either requester or a connection to a London organization. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. I'm happy to put forward the motion to do all of them at once.
Seconded by Councillor Ferreira. So we have items 4.1 through 4.5 on the floor. Any questions or comments before we call the vote? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to open the vote on that.
Closing the vote, motion passes 6-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Moving along to item 5, deferred matters and additional business. We have item 2.4, the 2022 annual update on Budweiser Gardens. That was asked to be dealt with separately from the consent agenda. Councillor Trussow, you asked to have that dealt with separately, so I will start my speakers list with you.
Thank you very much. I have a few questions that I'd like to address through the chair to whoever in staff wants to handle these. And of course, this is the first time this new council is looking at the Bud Gardens matter. My understanding is that there was an original memorandum of understanding in 2000, which governs which governs with any amendments that have been made to that our current relationship with our what's the appropriate term, our operator, our partner who operates the gardens. What I'm looking for, and what I'm looking for a little bit more in this report is some detail about our ongoing relationship with the operator and what were the terms of the original 2000 memorandum of understanding. Which is to say, I would be more comfortable voting on this if I could first understand what the baseline is in terms of what legal agreement we're operating under. I like to see the legal agreements. And number two, I'll have some further questions about what we mean by the actionable betterments. But I want to go back just in time to 2000 and understand this contract.
Well, let's start with Ms. Barbone, although I know that 2000 long predates her time in this role, but I'm sure she's done her homework and can provide us some background on this.
Thank you, through the chair. So I think the easiest way to answer that question is to refer you to section 1.2 of the report. So it is essentially, when this was originally done in 2020, was essentially a public-private partnership that initiated the deal. So the City of London, through that agreement, which is exceptionally long, so there are volumes and volumes and volumes of that agreement. But to suffice it to say that 1.2 is that the land is owned by the City of London. The land was put forward to a trust, and the trust manages the land until the end of the 50-year agreement. There was a partnership that was formed through this agreement where the land is leased to the partnership, and of which the City of London receives rent in return for that agreement. So through that rent is essentially based on a cost sharing of the original, through the cash flow, the net cash flow of the proceeds each and every year. So in the initial term, there was a cost sharing that was 20% that went to the City of London, the remainder went to the partnership. In years 6 to 10, it was increased to 45%. And in years 11 to the end of the lease agreement in year 50, the cost sharing on the net cash flows is 70%. So for a number of years, the City of London receives as rent, which is the extent of our funding relationship at this point in time, where we receive the revenues that come in and that are reported annually through the Corporate Services Committee. So it's really ultimately, that is where we see. We also receive a share of, there's $1 on every single ticket that comes forward, and that is shown here. The city proceeds from ticket sales that we receive on those done at the box office. That contributes to the annual share. So in the event that there is a loss, the city receives a minimum payment of $50,000. That is for the entire term of the agreement over the 50 years. So up until COVID hit, the city had never received solely a minimum payment. It had exceeded the $50,000 based on the calculation of the rent payment, with the exception of when COVID hit and the entertainment industry took a very significant impact as a result, with the venues closed and quite some restrictions on the number of events that could actually occur. So through that, there is, as part of the agreement, if there is a loss, the City of London does not become out of pocket. We still receive the minimum rent, but that should the proceeds begin to return positive those go back and repay the losses first, and then we continue to receive the share of those net cash flows in the future according to the formula. So that, in essence, is the entire agreement in a nutshell of what the city's relationship is. So we're essentially arm's length at this point because of the leasing agreement and the partnership agreement that covers, and Spectra, who is now OVG 360, are the managers of the facility in accordance with the agreement. So they manage the day-to-day, they provide the information to us, and we then report that out to council each and every year.
Thank you, Ms. Barbone. Councillor Trossel?
Thank you, that's helpful further through the chair. So I take it that there was a final approved memorandum of understanding in 2000 that's been amended from time to time?
Ms. Barbone?
Thank you, through the chair. So since that initial agreement was completed, there has only been one amendment since that point in time. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but it was a very minor amendment that spoke to some of the betterments in the facility when they were looking to add the floor for the Raptors to now begin playing at the facility. So there was Zambonis that also got covered under that, but they were very minor in nature, and it's only been utilized a few times since it came forward, and it again comes to council for the approval before any funds are spent.
Would this
And
be?
sorry,
if I may
Councillor
continue.
Trossel, I just want to clarify. I'm sure we would be more than happy to have the Raptors here, but I think Ms. Barbone was referencing the Lightning.
I'm sorry, Lightning, oh my goodness, my apologies.
I'm sure we would welcome the revenue from a Raptors game, but we'll go back to Councillor Trossel.
Thank you, I didn't catch that. And in fact, it is betterments that I'm mostly concerned with here today. And I take it the term betterments is just the sort of arena term that we're using for capital improvements that go to the ability to put on shows behind the scenes that audiences might not necessarily see.
Ms. Barbone?
Thank you, through chair. So the betterments speak, and there is a definition, which I don't have in front of me, that was put forward at that time, but it essentially is a capital cost for something new and completely different. So if there's a new capital outlay, so if it's a repair or general maintenance, that is captured through a capital repair fund that funds the repair and ongoing support of maintaining state of good repair in the facility. Anything specifically for something new as a betterment, meaning something better and new for the facility, would be captured under that agreement, and it would come forward to council for approval.
Okay, so I take it from what you just said then that there was a capital fund that was established under the original MOU, and that is something that's ongoing, that has been paid into over the years?
Ms. Barbone?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So that was something that was established right at the very beginning. There is a formula for what gets contributed to that, but it is part of prior to the results that you see, as part of a normal expenditure that goes into that capital repair fund that they then utilize to do all the planned maintenance and improvements of the facility when things need to be repaired.
Councillor Trossel?
Okay, thank you. I'll continue. Is there a reason why, I know we want to keep our, agenda packets short, and there's probably a lot of documentation here, but is there a reason why this council could not be provided with all these background documents as part of this discussion, for those of us who are really interested in contracts? It may just be me.
Ms. Barbone?
Thank you. Because the agreements are with London as a third party and involve several other partners, they are not something that is readily available, given the state that it is a public-private partnership and that the city ultimately negotiated that at the very beginning, and they would be something that has been done in confidential session.
Councillor
I'm
Trossel?
sorry, are you saying they're not available because they're confidential, or they're not available because they're not available?
Thank you. To be clear, they're not available because they are confidential in nature.
In which
Councillor
case,
Trossel?
yeah.
Just Through the chair.
Yeah, through the chair, in which case, if we wanted to see this as a council, we would do that in a closed session?
Ms. Barbone.
Thank you through the chair. Yes, those are great. So the initial agreement predates long before me, so I can't speak to that one. But certainly the amending agreement was approved in confidential session and would be subject to our confidential rules in the Municipal Act.
Fair enough, and this has been very helpful so far. I, as a counselor, do not feel comfortable proceeding with this at this point. It's not because I don't trust anybody or I think anything is being not provided to us, but I would very much like to be privy to these documents. I would like to look at some particular clauses. And to be more specific, because I'm not on a fishing expedition here, through the chair, to be more specific, I am interested in the obligation of our partner to be making payments into the capital fund. I would understand the capital fund is sort of an insurance policy that the city has, that the building will be properly maintained, and if there is ever a need to draw on funds for additional benefits, we would have a clear delineation as to whether or not this would be an appropriate new area of work that would be appropriate to go to the taxpayers to ask for funding. I don't feel equipped to deal with this right now, and at the same time, I don't want to impose an unreasonable burden on staff or the operators. And I'm just wondering, maybe before I continue with my questions, if somebody else would like to just ask some questions about this, and I can come back to my specific question.
Well, I do have the mayor on the speakers list next, Councillor, so I appreciate you giving him an opportunity to speak. Just before I go to the mayor, I just want to be, I want colleagues to be clear that what we're doing today is receiving a report with the annual update. There is no consideration right now at this time for a specific betterment ask. But I also think it's important to delineate between a betterment ask for all members of the committee. I think Ms. Barbone was very clear that the capital repairs reserve fund is for ongoing maintenance and repairs. It's not necessarily for major capital upgrades, which would be where the betterment ask would come through a process confidentially to us in camera for consideration. And so just to clarify that with everybody, and then I'll go to Mayor Morgan.
Yes, first let me say I think it's reasonable for councillors to want to understand the terms of the agreement and how it works, particularly the betterment piece on how those decisions are made, how they're flown, or how they flow to council for a decision or not, and in which case, you know, those are, I think, are very reasonable questions that need to be answered in the proper forum, whether here or in camera or even through just a meeting with staff to get some clarification on how the agreements work. I actually wanted to comment on a couple of things. First, I want to comment on the success of the partnership, and I think over the years we've seen significant revenues flow in to the city, which has allowed us to continue on with the debt payments to the point where next year we will be able to make the final payment on the debt associated with the building, and then proceed with another 30 years to go in the agreement, which is, I think, a great position for us to be on. And it seems to me like there's been a reasonable return on investment from the perspective of the city over this time period. The structure of the agreement that leads us to be in a situation where, you know, although no one could predict COVID, we did have a security measure where there's at least $50,000 now contributed to the city, irrespective of the losses. However, the losses do need to be paid back over time, and that will depress, you know, the flows that come back to the city. So my comment, and this is really just a comment more than a question, is, and I know there's no decision on this today, but in the executive summary, further a draft proposal for reinvestment in the facility that will maintain the arena's competitiveness and will generate additional revenue will be the subject of a future report to council for review and consideration, I assume. Within that, and I think that that's appropriate, the facility is 20 years old, there's 30 years left. I think we should be continuously looking at ways to ensure it remains competitive. At the time, it was a state-of-the-art facility. There are many other facilities that have built that either rival ours or in fact have features that ours do not. So I think that competitiveness is an important lens to consider in whatever proposal for reinvestment might come forward. The second is the additional generation of revenue. I think that that's also important as a revenue partner within this. And as you can see, ticket sales do flow back to the city. That is a way for any sort of capital investment that we may be considering under future reinvestment in the facility. That is an important component, and so being able to grow those revenues, I think, are an important piece. But also, I think a reasonable return on investment for the city is an expectation we should have. If we're going to consider investing capital in this facility, I think that there should be an expectation that, there's a deal that is a win-win for all involved. And so, I would be looking for that in any sort of future agreement. And also, I think that this is a public facility. Although you buy tickets, we do know that we have the ability under the agreement to put it out for special days for organizations and others that United Way and others have used in the past. The customer service-facing aspects of the facility and any sort of capital renewal, which essentially would be a component that drives revenue. I would be looking for enhancements and improvements to those probably as well, so that it's an enhanced customer experience within the facility. In any sort of future investment. And I don't know when a proposal would come forward, but I just wanted to share my thoughts that say, I think arena competitiveness is important. I think additional revenue is important. I think a reasonable and fair and balanced return on investment for all those involved, making it a win-win is important, but also, an enhanced customer experience so that we can continue to be competitive in attracting events like the Briar, which not only will drive ticket sales that are returned to the city, but a huge economic driver for the businesses, the stores, the shops downtown, and our hotels, which again feeds back to the municipality through the municipal accommodation tax. That ability for us to remain competitive in driving that economic impact is really important. So we need to keep our mind to being competitive with this facility, because we need to be able to ensure that we get those flows back to our city, because we certainly are in competition with others. And on that, I know that Tourism London will do work on an economic impact analysis of the Briar. I'll look forward to seeing that when it's available. But I think it will clearly demonstrate, how important this facility is in our downtown core to driving traffic, investment, hotel stays, and support for those local businesses that are in the core of the city. So I don't have any questions. I just, with that line in the report, and obviously I'd save any sort of debate or dialogue on until I saw exactly what the details were. But I do think that at the 20-year mark, I'm glad to hear that there is thought involved in ensuring that this facility remains competitive for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just advise I've got Councillor McAllister, Councillor Ferreira, and myself on the speakers list. So Councillor McAllister first, and then Councillor Ferreira.
Thank you, and through the chair. They do mention that a draft multi-year proposal is being finalized. And I was wondering if we have any indication of whether that's going to be a proposal coming to us in our current multi-year, or if this is something that they will be pitching further down the road. And I think my concern with doing it now is that, as we've noticed, that we were not operating at a loss, but we obviously weren't doing that much through the pandemic, and it will take a few years to get back to those levels. Is this something that they're looking to present to us sooner rather than later, or is this something for the next multi-year budget? Thank you.
Ms. Barbone.
Thank you through the chair. So I believe there's a couple of components. So I believe the largest portion will be forwarded to the multi-year budget after council has an opportunity to review it. There is some initial pieces that they are looking to do sooner rather than later. And there are some proposed funding sources that have been set aside. The Budweiser Gardens expansion discussion has been around for quite some time. The pandemic put it on hold for a period of time. So certainly there are some opportunities for some financing through the municipal accommodation tax since it's a tourism-driven idea, but certainly that'll be up to the council as to how they wish to proceed, and certainly I think there's some components that could be phased in over time, that there's some things immediate versus things that are long-term that the council can choose at their discretion.
Anything further, Councillor?
Thank you. And through the chair, just a quick follow-up. So we will perhaps be seeing, in terms of the costing, we'll see some projects associated with BUD coming up fairly soon.
Ms. Barbone?
Thank you. I believe I'm just waiting on receiving their information and final, and then we would be bringing forward a report to put it in front of the council to have all the information that we have available to us.
Councillor Ferreira?
And thank you, and through the chair, appreciate the points brought up by my colleagues here already. My question, I do have a question regarding the actual report right now, so it's a little bit separate from what was spoken about, but I thought I would just ask because it's for my own personal interest and for the record. Looking at Appendix B, the operations summary, so I believe that from what was said, any type of like net positive on the net income is carried forward to pay for any kind of debts that are brought in years coming down for the future. But I did see that with the last few years, obviously with the pandemic, we're definitely in the loss section. So I just wanted to know, I'm assuming there's a fund that money is going into when we do have surpluses, and then that fund is going to be drawn out to pay for these for losses. I just wanted to know what is the balance of that fund, if there is one, or if I could get maybe any type of like clarification on how this would move forward. Thanks.
Ms. Barbone?
Thank you, through the chair. So when you look at the 2022, 2021, and 2020 columns on page 23, so you'll see the initial loss in 2020, which is when COVID hit, and then we have a 2.7 in 2021, and then 2022, it is much smaller. So the worst year was 2021. So right now on 2023's year end, so their year end is as of June, so these numbers are as of June 30th. So they've had a number of months of operation already, and so far are tracking and are estimating that there will be a profit in 2023. So I believe that that is good news as the entertainment industry is rebounding. So if there are profits in 2023, there's a formula that gets applied, and those profits would go towards the total of those losses until such time that the balance weighs and the losses are repaid. Now there is a cap on how much can actually be repaid each and every year, so that if they do a really phenomenal 1 year, that benefit would come to the City of London in accordance with the cost sharing on the revenue. So that's essentially how it does. So the city isn't out of pocket. We continue to receive the $50,000 minimum if there is a deficit, and if there's profits, it would go forward to be repaid, but we still maintain the minimum rent of the $50,000 irrespective of the loss repayment.
Councillor?
And thank you, through the chair. Just a follow-up. So I don't know what the years prior to 2018 looked like, but I just wanted to know, is there enough money that is able to cover those losses that we saw during the pandemic years? And just kind of, I don't know if you can speak on it, but like, where is the balance of, I guess, that fund at the moment?
Ms. Barbone?
Thank you. So if I understand correctly, you're looking at all the cash flows that have come to the City of London historically since the building was opened. So those get reported and are collected as revenue as the City of London. Those have offset debt repayment amounts, as there's been, as you see, the debt has been owing since the facility was created. 2023 marks the final year. Those have gone towards offsetting the debt repayments to historically. So all of the money that has come to the City of London has been put to good use to repay the debt that was issued when the building was done. So when the losses are occurred, the way the agreement works is that essentially the partnership carries those losses, and the funding comes from future revenues until those are repaid. So there's no obligation on the part of the city. All it does is it limits the amount of future revenue until those losses are repaid in terms of the benefit of future incremental revenue that the City of London gets. So the historical stuff has all been done and spoken for. What I can tell you is that overall, based on the initial estimates of Bud Gardens, even with the losses that have occurred over those 3 years, we are still beyond the expectations that the facility was expected to deliver at the City of London over the course of the 20 years.
Councillor Ferreira?
Thank you through you. Thank you.
So if committee will indulge me, just a couple of brief comments from the chair. The mayor alluded to it. Those who had an opportunity to attend the Briar, I know Ms. Livingston was able to attend on the opening night, and despite a blizzard that night, we had a wonderful attendance. I know the mayor and myself and several other members of council were able to be there, not just on opening night, but through the course of the 10-day event. But I will share and underscore what the mayor was mentioning. I know the feedback from our downtown businesses and from our hoteliers in particular has been absolutely wonderful. When we have hotels at 100% capacity, that is great news for the City of London. I know that our Tourism London team is working on an economic impact study, just as they did for the Vanier Cup. There will be one for the Briar, and we will get to see the results of that. Without wanting to pin an exact timeline on our Tourism London staff, but typically those are about a 6 to 8 week turnaround. So we won't have to wait too long to see the benefits that the Briar brought to the city. But that's why the competitiveness remains so important. Before the Briar was even concluded, members of our delegation from London to Curling Canada that made the pitch for this event, we're already talking about, can we get the Olympic trials back in 2 years? And that would be a phenomenal thing too. I mean, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but we can only attract those sort of world-class events if we remain competitive and keep our building in good shape. And I will note that, and it's in the report as well, when the partnership was originally established, it was anticipated that about halfway through the life of the building, some capital investments might need to be made to upgrade the building to modern standards. And I get around the province a fair amount for hockey-related travel. We don't normally play in barns as nice as Bud Gardens, but I do know that there are communities that are behind us in terms of the quality of facilities, and they are not successful at attracting larger events. But there are communities who have actually taken the model that we used for Budweiser Gardens, implemented it in their own city with newer, more modern facilities, and they are more competitive in those bid attempts. So it will be important, but of course, I too will want to see a reasonable return on investment where we're not just putting money in, but we're getting money back out and seeing our revenues increase as well. So look forward to that report coming forward in the future. But I think it's good news that we are essentially, well, we're only getting the 50,000 plus ticket sales this year. We are back in the black in terms of seeing how the facility is moving forward. So that's good news. And with the final debt repayment scheduled for 2023, it's even better news for the future. And we'll see if there's Councillor Trussow.
Councillor Pribble or Councillor
Yeah,
Stevenson?
sorry, Councillor Pribble, I missed your.
Anything? No. Okay, I take it that if I ask for this to come back, and I want to be sure about this, because it is not my intention to hold this up, and it's not my intention to impugn any of the really good things that have been going on in this facility that have been mentioned. If this came back to this committee in an appropriate form, presumably from what I hear would be in closed session, would that impede the ongoing negotiations that you anticipate having?
Ms. Barbone?
Thank you, through the chair. I might have to seek clarity on what it is so there are no current negotiations ongoing. They are submitting a proposal to us, which I will be bringing forward to council for its consideration. So that would be the process, and certainly is up to the will of council, whether you wish to support it, defer it, entertain it. That is absolutely within council's purview under the current mandate. So this report is simply reporting out on what the revenue has been that the city received for the last year of its operations for the year ending June 30th, 2022. So there, I'm not sure what it is you'd be looking to have us come back with. If you're looking for former reports that have gone through, that request can be made in camera. All legal agreements were approved by City Council, so that's certainly something that could come forward if that's what the councillor is looking for.
Well, and just before I go back to Councillor Trussell, just for clarification, Ms. Barbone, it's my understanding that any member of council can request access from our senior leadership team through the clerk to prior in-camera reports that have been received by previous councils. And I'll just perhaps look to either Ms. Barbone or the clerk to confirm that any councillor can make that request individually through the clerk's office.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. So Councillor Trussell, if you do want to get those backdated reports, the clerk's office can facilitate getting access to those in-camera reports for you.
Yes, so I'm going to try to wrap this up. You've really answered a lot of my questions. My underlying concern here is I don't want surprises later. I want to understand exactly what's coming, and I would like as much notice as possible. If it's a situation where we actually need to prepare a business a justification for some type of betterment, I would like to get that started sooner rather than later, as I want to avoid a situation in the upcoming budget process where we have to make quick decisions without full information. I don't think there's much you can say right now in terms of what's going to be moving forward in the negotiations, because they haven't started, although it would be great if we could get some idea as to what some of the potential betterments are. But what I would like to do, though, is I would like to offer a very, very slight amendment. Appendix A be received for information. To that, I would like to add, quote, and further information to be provided to council to a subsequent corporate services committee meeting, in parentheses, in camera, if appropriate, with the following documents. And one, the final approved memorandum of understanding and final agreement identified in that memorandum of understanding. And two, any amendments to said agreements. And three, any further information about the nature of the anticipated betterments that is available. And I would like to offer that as an amendment.
So first we'll look to see if there's a seconder for that. Councillor Ferreira, question?
And thank you, through you. Before anything, I just wanted to actually just get that, if I could read that just to go through it, because I wasn't able to catch everything there.
I know the clerk has been typing away, so let's just give it a moment, see if we can have that in eScribe for you. Mayor Morgan.
Perhaps while that's being worded up, I have a question for our staff that I think will hopefully put the councilor's mind at ease a little bit. If in the report you say a draft multi-year proposal is being finalized that is going to come before us for consideration, I think what the desire of council will be is we want to understand, what is the current structure of the agreement? If there are changes to the agreement in that proposal, what are they and what are the impacts, so that we can make, whatever decision we need to make on that. And so my understanding of the counselor's request is getting a little bit of background information so that we can fully understand and fully consider any future proposals before us, particularly if proposals have any sort of significant amendments to the agreement as it currently stands. Ideally, depending on when stuff is coming forward, that could all be done at the same time. I'm not sure when a draft multi-year proposal, but if it's going to be a ways out, then it would be nice to be able to, I think, have a little bit of prep time on that so that councillors can fully consider the proposal. I don't know if that's where the councillor was going, but I think our staff would be willing to do that. I'm not sure if the motion is absolutely necessary, although I don't have a specific aversion to it, but I have to read it first. But if I could just ask through the chair, that would be like a reasonable expectation for us to have, is that if something was coming forward, you're going to give us kind of the current state, the change in the current state, and the impacts of that.
Ms. Barbone.
Thank you through the chair. Absolutely, that would be the intent. So once we have whatever the information is, we would try to put that in the context of what all the agreements are and what council's, any changes as to what they are now and versus what they would be amending. So certainly the intent is that we would be providing all that information so that council has all the details to make an informed decision.
Mayor Morgan.
Do we have any sense on the approximate time frame for the draft proposal to come forward?
Ms. Barbone.
Thank you through the chair. So originally I was hopeful that we might be able to do it in April of next month, but based on the timelines, it may be the first one in May potentially. I can't speak to the agreements and what was approved originally in the year 2000, which is well before my time. That would be information we'd be looking to have clerks support us with, but certainly we would have all the relevant information that we would try to pull together as quickly as we can to bring it before council.
Mayor Morgan, you're okay with that?
I'm fine with it. I think what I hear colleagues saying is they just want to be well informed about what our current arrangement is, so that we can fully consider any sort of changes to it. And if it's not changes to the agreement, at least, the capital investments, whether they're under the betterments piece or whether they're under amendments to the agreement.
Okay, and while we have been seeking those clarifications, our stalwart clerk has managed to get this all into eScribe. So if you refresh, you can see now that the proposed amendment, and I'll read it out so that everybody has it again, that item 2.4 be amended to include the following, that civic administration be directed to include the following as part of a future report for the Corporate Services Committee for review and consideration. A, the final approved MOU, the memo of understanding, and the final agreement identified in the MOU. C, any amendments to the agreement or MOU, and C, any further information on the nature of future betterments made available at this time. Which I think might actually be redundant if parts A and B are coming forward as part of the future report on the proposal from.
Yeah, why don't you strike that last part?
Okay, so I see the mover suggesting we can get rid of part C because that would be just included as information when a proposal from the trust comes forward for us.
We're going to get that anyway.
Yeah. Councillor Ferreira.
And thank you. And through the way that reads, it does specify what we're looking for. So I do want to see the memorandum of understanding and the final agreement, and any amendments, I guess, that would be applicable to that since the beginning till now, which would be good. So I would second that.
Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder. Do we have any discussion on this? Seeing none. Councillor Stevenson.
Just looking for clarity on that. This would be in closed session, what we're asking for?
Yes, it would be, because the proposal will come to us as a closed session proposal. Councillor Trussell.
As much as I like to see these things in open session, this would be a decision that the clerk would make.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then I will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion passes 6-0.
And then we will have to vote on the original recommendation that we received today's report. And unless we have any further discussion, questions or comments, Councillor McAllister, you're going to move it. Do we have it seconded by Councillor Stevenson? And we'll just get the clerk to prep that. I would encourage colleagues to keep in mind when this future report comes forward. As Ms. Barbone noted, the background material on this can fill several volumes. Those who are able, I would really encourage you to use electronic and not printed copies to save on paper, because it is likely going to be several hundred pages long. Without guessing exactly how many hundreds, if we can save some paper, I think that would be great. And we'll ask the clerk to open the vote on that now.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
All right, colleagues, we have one item for confidential session, so I will need a motion to move in camera. Moved by Councillor Ferreira, seconded by Councillor Trussow. And we'll get the clerk to open the vote on that. Mayor Morgan.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
And bear with us for just a moment, colleagues, while we shuffle the deck chairs to get the appropriate people in and out of the room. All right. The clerk advises me that we are successfully returned to public session. I will call on Vice Chair Trussow to report out on the matter for which we went in camera.
At the sixth meeting, thank you, Chair. At the sixth meeting of the Corporate Services Committee, item 6.1, the committee engaged a matter pertaining to litigation or potential litigation and advice that's necessary to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose and directions and instructions to officers and employees or agents of the municipality, and that progress was made on that matter.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trussow. And we have nothing left on the agenda other than a motion to adjourn, colleagues. So we can do this by hand, moved by Councillor McAllister and seconded by Councillor Ferreira. All those in favor?
Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. And as always, for those who want more committee excitement, Planning and Environment Committee begins at 4 p.m. this afternoon.